RFK Jr.'s nomination as head of Health and Human Services is bringing a whole new can of worms to the new Trump administration. This wouldn't be the first time RFK Jr. carried worms with him. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. It's pretty clear to everybody that America is in a health crisis. 3/4 of U.S. adults are now overweight or obese. It's so bad that when I read that stat, I got to 3/4 and thought the next word was going to be pounders. According to this infographic from the CDC, 38 million Americans have diabetes. That's around 1 in 10 people. And 98 million, or more than 1 in 3 Americans, have pre-diabetes. Doctors are now seeing more patients with cancer and heart issues, not to mention a rise in kidney disease and autoimmune and allergic diseases. Oh, and let's not forget, it's not just our physical health that's suffering. We've got a raging mental health crisis as well, which might be hard to remember since early onset dementia is also on the rise. Yet for some strange reason, trust in public health institutions has sunk to rock bottom lows. I wonder why. This became especially true since COVID. Thinking back on it, it almost makes me wish I had early onset dementia so I could forget seeing officials push draconian lockdowns, flip-flop on policies, censor things that turned out to be true, and act like complete hypocrites. The real virus was the faith in institutions we lost along the way. Having gone through all this, Americans desperately want change, and many are hoping that will happen under Donald Trump and the man he's nominating to lead the Department of Health and Human Services, RFK Jr., the hunky poster child of Make America Healthy Again. I hope he burned them calories after eating at McDonald's with his homies. Dang, now I really do want Mickey D's. RFK is probably thinking, "For I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but do the very thing I hate." Romans 7:15. While Trump is probably thinking, "Robble, robble, robble." Hamburger 3:16. In any case, Trump gave the go-ahead for RFK Jr. to take charge of making America healthy again. And they are planning on shaking things up by making some rather drastic changes. RFK Jr. is starting first with the much-beloved National Institutes of Health. He wants a shakeup in personnel at the NIH, forcing the old out and bringing the new in. He also wants to shift the NIH's focus away from infectious diseases to chronic diseases like obesity. So he must have just been doing research here. Greasy, delicious research. The NIH is just the tip of the iceberg. And speaking of potentially dangerous water, RFK Jr. is also talking about fluoride. He said that Trump would recommend getting rid of fluoride in drinking water. Trump himself said he didn't talk to RFK Jr. about it at the time, but he also didn't rule out the possibility. So not entirely accurate. Must have been a brain fart. Maybe that's what killed the worms. The NIH, water. What else does RFK Jr. intend to drastically change? Well, he also wants to free health agencies from corporate capture, revisit pharmaceutical ad guidelines in addition to pesticide and other chemical use standards, reform crop subsidies, and stop the revolving door between industry and government. RFK Jr. definitely isn't getting many fans from the pharmaceutical and food industries. But it's probably okay. I mean, who ever heard of anything bad happening to a Kennedy after angering powerful clandestine organizations? Now, RFK Jr. heading the department in charge of overseeing health doesn't sit well with a lot of people. Many in the medical science community are panicking, with RFK Jr.'s harshest critics condemning him as a clear and present danger, citing his opinions on things like vaccines. And I'm not even talking about the multiple giant dead animals he claims to have transported. Weird flex, muscle man. A lot of the media will point to him spreading conspiracies, like the government planned COVID. But with a pesky thing called context, it's actually more nuanced.
Many people argue that this pandemic was a plandemic, that it was planned from the outset, that it's part of a sinister scheme. I can't tell you the answer to that. I don't have enough evidence. A lot of it feels very planned to me, but I don't know. I will tell you this. If you create these mechanisms for control, they become weapons of obedience for authoritarian regimes, no matter how beneficial or innocent the people who created them.
So clearly he was calling out authoritarian overreach in the name of public health. Media also quote him as saying that Wi-Fi causes cancer and leaky brains. Now, NPR frames that in a way that makes him sound crazy. If you actually listen to what he says, he frames it in a more scientific way that sounds more believable.
I think it degrades your mitochondria, and it opens your blood-brain barrier.
Now, is that true? I have no idea. And I doubt you'd find an expert who would agree. But here's the problem. The issue is America is really unhealthy. The institutions that are supposed to protect our health are at best not working, or at worst, horribly corrupt. So many people don't trust the experts. So, who do you trust? A guy on the Joe Rogan podcast? Taking shots at powerful industries definitely doesn't win RFK Jr. any brownie points with industry heads or people with large financial interests in industries he wants to shake up. It also hasn't exactly earned him universal support within his own clan. So sure, some of his ideas are way out there. But others? They're pretty standard in Europe, even if they ruffle feathers here in the US. For example, he wants to promote raw milk. Now, many warn that raw milk can be dangerous and lead to human infections. But according to Brown University economist Emily Oster, out of around 11 million Americans who consume raw milk, only 760 per year will get sick because of it. As a matter of fact, raw milk is legally available from farms in England, New Zealand, France, Italy, Germany, Norway, and many other countries. As for getting fluoride out of the tap water, that's pretty common too. Germany, Norway, and Sweden don't put fluoride in water. Neither does Japan. The Economist points out that some scientists think there are good reasons to pull the plug on fluoride in water. At the very least, fluoridating water may be redundant, especially since fluoride is already a common ingredient in toothpaste these days. And it's more than just milk and water that seem to be controversial here, but not in Europe. In the US, babies get a hepatitis B vaccine within 24 hours of birth. Not every European country follows that US protocol. Finland and Iceland neither require nor recommend the vaccine. Now, just as a disclosure, I'm not saying milk pasteurization, fluoride in water, or hepatitis B vaccines are bad things. Plenty of countries do in fact pasteurize milk, put fluoride in water, and recommend hepatitis B vaccines. I'm just saying the idea of not having them isn't as crazy as some people make it out to be, if it's practiced all over another continent. They're like mullets. You may love them, but some folks might not be comfortable with you forcing that on their kids. So there's no question that people can find all sorts of reasons to criticize RFK Jr., whether it's over his positions on everything I mentioned, or his positions on hydrochloroquine, ivermectin, abortion, government healthcare, you name it. But there is a reason people are drawn to him. And I'm not just talking about his abs. RFK Jr. genuinely has some ideas that appeal to a lot of Americans across the political spectrum. For example, people like the idea that vaccine manufacturers should be held accountable for harm. Practically every other business is. If you run a shoe store and broken glass somehow gets into a pair of sandals you're selling, you can't call someone who slices up their foot a conspiracy theorist and have a judge throw out the lawsuit. People also like the idea of making sure FDA officials don't have conflicts of interest. Far too many regulators are getting gigs with the companies they used to regulate. For example, FDA Commissioner Mark McClellan served under the Bush administration. He's now on the board of Johnson & Johnson. FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb served in Trump's first term. He's now on Pfizer's board. Gottlieb's successor, Stephen Hahn, is now CEO of Flagship Pioneering, the venture capital firm behind Moderna. This would be like Ronald McDonald being in charge of regulating the fast food industry. Man, I have McDonald's on the brain today. Better than other things on the brain, I guess. The fact that government regulators can find sweet positions in the corporations they used to regulate makes a lot of people wonder whether they're doing their jobs as impartially as possible. So it's no wonder why people like seeing RFK Jr. call out America's broken food system and accuse it of mass poisoning. Emphasis on mass, considering how obese it's making us. Many, like BMO Capital Markets analyst Evan Seigerman, anticipate that RFK Jr. will focus on U.S. food policy and its relationship to chronic illness. And it seems this is something the American people want because, without a doubt, there's no question that the American diet is unhealthy compared to others across the globe. In the U.S., kids are eating way too much junk food. There are many more ingredients in American foods compared to other countries, and Americans see RFK Jr. as someone to help solve the crisis. You can tell just by looking at the ingredients list for the same product in the US and abroad. These containers even look bigger because they need the extra room to fit all those additional 19-syllable ingredients. And we know this topic hits some nerves, because in a strange attempt to fact-check RFK Jr.'s comments of artificial ingredients in Fruit Loops cereal, the New York Times pretty much proved his point by listing a bunch of artificial dyes. They have since updated the article to now criticize him on the ingredient count, while missing the entire point RFK Jr. made at the time. With rising medical costs, growing anxiety about the future, and an increasingly unhealthy population and calls for greater accountability from pharma companies, many people are drawn to disruptive outsiders like Trump and RFK Jr. to challenge the status quo. So just wait, after 4 years, Americans will be so healthy. They'll have the best health. You'll be so healthy, you'll be sick of being healthy. And before YouTube kicks you to some random video, here's another episode of America Uncovered I know you're going to like. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thank you for watching America Uncovered.